So today we're learning now the end of chapter 3 in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah on page 156 in Tanya. The Balatanya, the author, has posited as not just a query, but an actual fact from his perspective and the Torah's perspective, that the existence of the world, the emergence of the world, comes from Hashem, comes from God. And the way God made it was through the tzimtzum, through the contracting his infinite light, giving place for existence. And once existence became part of the reality of the physical of the universe became reality. Alter Rebbe now, so he gave us an example for that. The example is the sun and the ray of the sun. The ray of the sun comes from the sun ball, comes from the source, the mokor it's called in Hebrew. It coming from the source is nullified within the source. It's not that it doesn't exist in the source, it does exist as a ray of the sun within the sun. And once it exists within the sun, when Hashem decides for the ray of the sun to come out of the sun, it comes out of the sun and we feel it. So the difference between the ray of the sun within the sun ball, within its source, and the ray of the sun within the world is for us. For Hashem, in a sense, it's no difference. Because for Hashem, the ray of the sun was in the sun, was within the sun ball, or let's say even for the sun. For the source has something within itself that becomes a later part of the universe. But from our perspective, we don't see it while it's within its source, the sun ball. We only see the ray of the sun once it emerges. And the same Alter Rebbe says is true for the universe. It says Friday night in Kabbalah Shabbos, in the prayers that we do Friday night, so when we say Lechadoidi and we sing it and we chant it and we dance with it, whatever, Soif Maaseh b'machshava tchila, that Shabbos, the seventh day of the week, Shabbos, it's the end product. It's the seventh day of the week. It's not the first, second, or third. It's the seventh. Nevertheless, Soif Maaseh, the end of action, the last day, the seventh day, b'machshava tchila, it ascended in God's thought in the beginning. God would have not created the world if not for Shabbos. You think about that. That's why Shabbos is so important. If not for Shabbos, we wouldn't have a world. We wouldn't be here. That's what we're saying every Friday night. People are running around, dancing, clapping, singing, and everything. What are they saying? Soif Maaseh b'machshava tchila. In other words, the 6 days of the week are small change. What's the big thing? Shabbos. It's a powerful thought. So, why do I say this? Hashem creates the world in 6 days, but it's the Shabbos that gives him a reason to create the world. So the 6 days of the week are a prelude to the Shabbos. Now, the world as it emerges from Hashem vis-a-vis the tzimtzum, the contraction of the infinite light, was the end product that Hashem wanted. In other words, now, I want you to think about this. We talk about an infinite light of God, where there's only God, the space, the cholo. Mokam HaChol is the language in Kabbalah and in Chassidus, and in Chira, the void filled with God's space, with the space filled with God's energy. That wasn't what God wanted. But God, you're in your home. It's all God. It's all great. It's all spirituality. There's no mess ups there. Sorry, I don't want that. I want mess-ups. I want challenges. I want difficulties. Oh, you do? For that, you need to create a world. Yeah, of course. And guess what he says? God says, that's my primary reason for God. Hashem, if you strip God from the world that he makes, he's no God. And it's not me saying it, it's Hashem saying it. So many sources in Torah and Tanakh support that idea. The Chaim Dalfin Rebbe here in Tanya doesn't say everything I'm saying to you now, but that's behind the brief words that he does say in this chapter, in chapter 3. Let's go back to the mashal of the sun, the source, and the ray of the sun. If the sun wouldn't be valuable, it wouldn't be sun if not for the ray of the sun. But nevertheless, the ray of the sun doesn't exist without it emerging from the sun ball. But in kavanah, in purpose and in focus, it's the ray of the sun. That's primary. Now, if we accept this axiom as a truth, then a question is to be asked, which is the last question in the end of chapter 3, which is very unusual that the Alter Rebbe ends with a question. And I'll have a little vart about that in a moment. So the question is, if we say that although God made a contraction, he's here, that means we are living on earth, in the universe, in the presence of God. So how do we exist? The sun is hidden from the ray of the sun. That's how we're able to have the ray of the sun. Imagine, look, we just had an eclipse the other day, right? Something happens that the moon covers the sun, boom, it becomes dark. In other words, when you talk about two physical things, the sun and the ray of the sun, both are physical, it's not spiritual. Okay, science can measure the rays of the sun, the intensity of the heat, the weather that will be, it's all coming from there. If that's the case. So imagine right now there's the ray of the sun out, and all of a sudden God says, here, sun ball, the source, I want you to come out. What would happen to the ray of the sun? It would dissipate, it would disappear, because there's an overwhelming sun, the ball, the source. Moshe, do me a favor, Moshe Myers, mute yourself, please. So Hashem, in his infinite wisdom, doesn't allow the source of the sun to be present when the ray of the sun is working. And that's why the ray of the sun does what it does. Otherwise, it would cease to be. And we would have the sun ball and burn up, because it's too powerful for us. So Hashem says, no, I want you to exist. I'm going to hide the sun ball, the source, and all you're going to get is the ray of the sun. That's the mashal, the parable. In the nimshal, in the moral, seemingly it's not that way. Hashem is here. Hashem echad. If Hashem is here, how do we exist? Let's look inside now how the Alter Rebbe phrases this question. Look at, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the end of chapter 4. It's the beginning of the chapter. It begins with the words beginning of the line, Rak shebazeh. Rak shebazeh, in this matter of the mashal and the nimshal, of the parable and the moral, ein ha-mashal dome le-nimshal legamri. The Baal HaTanya says, the Alter Rebbe says, the parable, the mashal is not comparable to the moral at all, legamri. Not that there's some comparison. You hear that? Why not? L'chura, seemingly. This is his question. Why? Look what he says. Shebe mashal, in the parable, ein ha-makar b'metzias klal, the source, the source being the sun ball, is not in existence at all, b'chol ha'olam, in the space of the universe, of the world. And it's not on the earth where where the sun's rays are there as an existence, liyesh gomer. Conversely, Mashen Kain, Kol Habruyim, all creatures created by Hashem, Hein b'mekayram tomit. We are constantly within our source. You're telling me, Rakshay, you're telling me we don't see it. To the human eyes, the flesh, we don't see it. Says the Alter Rebbe, his question is, so why aren't creatures, why isn't creation, everything created, why is it not nullified of its existence to the source that's here? It's a very simple question. In other words, Isser, what did we answer? What did the Alter Rebbe say? Isser, wake up. What did the Alter Rebbe say? The Alter Rebbe said, I know, you're taking a little doze, but this is, you have to help him cup.
I'm awake and I'm writing notes.
Sorry, okay. Please forgive me, be me Michael, before Pesach. I don't want to wait for Erev Yom Kippur. I want now you have forgiveness. Apologize. But I got your attention, that's good. But I got your attention. That was the bottom line. Anyway, so, the Alter Rebbe, a simple question. Is God here? Hashem Echad? Moshe, is Hashem here? Yes, Hashem is here. So you're telling me Hashem is here, but Hashem made the world in such a way through the symptom that we don't see him. Big deal that we don't see him, but if he's here, we can't exist. The fact that from our perspective, in other words, like this is the question, is this all a mirage? Are we living in a fantasy world? Or like someone once told me, Rabbi Dalfin, you're great at the virtual world. You live in the virtual world. Are we living in the only in the virtual world? No. Menashe, the other day, went to see a physician. Hillel has been missing, probably he's working, saving lives. Everyone does, right? Everyone's doing things, right? That's it. So are we here or are we not here? And you make up your mind. That's this question. And to use, the Alter Rebbe says, the mashal I gave you of this ray of the sun coming from the sun, in this detail is not at all a good mashal. Because the sun ball is not here. It's not. When we look up, we're not getting the sun ball, we're getting the ray of the sun. That's why the ray of the sun exists. If the sun ball would be present on earth in the universe, the ray of the sun wouldn't function. That is the Alter Rebbe's question. Hasidim say over a word like this. Hasidim in general were careful not to learn the Moreh HaNevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, by Maimonides. Why not? Hasidim are like Rambam people. Even before the Rebbe started 40 years ago, by the way, the campaign to learn Rambam's 40 years. It started in 1984, I remember. I think it was either before Pesach or on Pesach. Spoke about it 40 years ago, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people have been learning Rambam, maybe millions by now. Every day, some learn the Sefer HaMitzvos, some learn a chapter a day, some learn 3 a day. And I would encourage you guys, if you use Chayenu, you have some of that in there. If you don't even have that, you can do it on your own. Anyway, so the Rambam, it's like the Frum world says, oh, Lubavitch stole the Rambam. It's not your Rambam, Lubavitchers. The Brisker were learning Rambam before you were learning Rambam, And guess what? Even before the Brisker, Jews were learning Rambam, especially the Sfardim. So it's not the Briskers, it's not the Lubavitchers, it belongs to everybody. And if anyone could claim fame to the Rambam, it's the Sfardim. Really? Right? A Machlekes, the Rambam, right, some Pesach, no? Who do you paskin? The Ashkenazim paskin like the Ramah. We don't eat rice, kidneys, legumes. The Rambam paskins, otherwise, Sfardi. Moshe ben Maimon Sfardi. Right? So the Rambam wrote Mishnah Torah, his magnum opus, right? Mishnah Torah. Then he wrote also Pirush HaMishnayos, commentary on the Mishnah, the Mishnayos. And then he also wrote Sefer HaMitzvahs. And then he also wrote Meira Nevuchim, a guide for the perplexed. The first three, Mishnah Torah, Sefer HaMitzvahs, and Pirush HaMishnayos is more what we call Nigla, the Talmudic, revealed study of Torah. Guide for perplexed is Jewish philosophy. Well, probably some of you have at least looked at it. I looked at it, or maybe some of you have studied it seriously. There's very, very heavy questions about existence and God. So Hasidim in general, were very weary of learning Meira HaNevuchim. Why? And the word, the saying that they would say to express their ambivalence to studying it was, you might go to sleep with a great question and wake up a heretic because you went to sleep without an answer, because there's very difficult to understand the answer. The question is easy. We can all ask questions. So that was a saying by Hasidim. Therefore, stay away from learning Meira Nevuchim. It's interesting. The Rebbe, in his Likutei Sichos, which is for everyone, cites from time to time Meira Nevuchim. It doesn't mean to say the Rebbe told us to learn Meira Nevuchim. He didn't. But on the other hand, to have this reluctance to look into Meira Nevuchim when you need to, I would say that was not what he taught. But regardless, let's not talk about the Rebbe. Let's talk about Hasidim in general, whether it be Buster Hasidim, Satmar Hasidim, Belzer, and Bavover, and Vishnitzer, and Chabadniks, and Breslover, and Slonimer. Hasidim, as a general rule, I'm making a generality, didn't learn the Moreh because of this reason. So here's the question. The Alter Rebbe ends chapter 3 in Shari Yichud Ve'emunah with a very, very powerful question. And truth be told, this is our last year before Pesach. We won't be back learning till a week and a half after Pesach, whatever. We are leaving with a question. Why isn't the Baal Tanya afraid that we might not come back to the shir? Because we don't have an answer to the question. So Rabbi Yoel, I heard this from Rabbi Yoel. So Rabbi Yoel said, Hasidim answered. That was the question that Hasidim asked on themselves and on the Alter Rebbe. How do you end the chapter with a question? We might not wake up the next morning interested in learning Tanya because we don't have an answer to the question. And if so, it's all hocus pocus. And the answer is, what is the question here? The question here is not like the question in Meira Nevuchim. In the Guide for the Perplexed, the question is, does God exist? Here the question is, since God exists, how do we exist? That question you should always have. It's a powerful thought. Right? So that's why by the guide, we're concerned. Emunah, God, Hashem. And if you start questioning Hashem, and you don't have an answer, it shakes up your foundation, you know. But here, the Alter Rebbe says, since Hashem is in the world, how do we exist? Even, right? So the question is, am I yesh? Am I ego? Right now, that my ego, there's no place for my ego and there's no place for me. It's all right. It's all right for 3.5 weeks to be in that mode. And frankly, the Ashgacha Pratis is so divine providence that the whole idea of Pesach, right? We're breaking for Pesach. The whole idea of Pesach is The matzah. What's the difference between matzah, Moshe, and bread? Bread rises. Challah. Matzah's flat. Right? And the difference between matzah is with the hay, right? The hay, the bittul, mem tzadik hay. The whole idea, you could use this vart at your sesdarim. The whole idea of matzah is expressed through the hay. The hay has two sides that are connected with each other, and then a little line making a hay, a Hebrew letter hay. There's space, empty space to go in through the hay. There's room. You know why there's room? Because matzah's bittul. Matzah's humility. When you're humble, there's space to get in. And guess what? People enjoy being around you because they sense you're humble. When a person's full of themselves, and I know, and I'm opinionated, and I'm stubborn, and all of that, people don't want to be around you. Why? Because you're yesh. You're full of yourself. You're a big challah. You're big. You're all over the place. But when you're a matzah, when you're flat, i.e., you have humility, that's something that is desirable. So this idea that the Alter Rebbe finishes the chapter here with a question, and the question is, how do we exist, is exactly the same idea as matzah. How do we exist? Why do we exist? But again, how do we exist? Meaning the humility is emphasized versus the yesh. Now, of course, he's going to answer it in the next chapters. He's going to explain and reconcile God being in the world every moment, and at the same time, there's existence. And that's why he just says, I want to just say the last few words of the chapter, to understand and answer this question, tzarech lahagdim, we need to preface. And he ends the chapter. And you know, the Alter Rebbe was the one who said, here's the end of chapter 2, and Perek Daled, that's from the Alter Rebbe. That didn't come from his sons or grandsons or someone else. He himself made the notes of where the chapters begin and chapters end. Now, we have a few minutes left. I just want to make a mini Farbrengen with you, and that is because this yesterday was the birthday of the the passing of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Reb Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson. Was born in 1860, passed away in 1920. He's known by his acronym Rashab, Resh Shin Bet Beis, Reb Shalom Ber Rashab, and he was coined by a chassid yet of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, as the Rambam of Chabad Chassidus. What does that mean? The Rambam is very analytical and splitting hairs. And that's why the Brisker, that's their whole approach to Torah, love the Rambam. You know, like I've told you, they roll up their sleeves and they say, now I'm going to take apart a Rambam. Or like Rabbi Soloveitchik would jokingly say that he would learn and he wouldn't understand the Rambam, and his mother said, don't worry, you'll be older, you'll be able to understand the Rambam. So the Rambam is the analytical approach to Torah. And this chassid said about the Rebbe Rashab when he was a young man, and as he saw his chassidus, the chassidus that he said and that he wrote, that he said, this cousin, a lot of cousins, this one is like the Rambam of Chassidus. And this is coming from a very big chassid 2 generations before. What do we understand from this? The Rebbe Rashab, in a sense, established the not just continuation of Lubavitch, of Chabad, at a very difficult time, going from the Tsar, right? The Tsars ended, and then came communism and all that. So not only was he during that period, but he brought what was called old Chabad Hasidus to new Chabad Hasidus. What do you mean old and new? The Alter Rebbe, the second Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe of Dovber, and the Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Lubavitch, the first one. Their style was a certain style that lent itself to more of a traditional style. Skipping the fourth Rebbe for a minute, the fifth Rebbe, he began this analytical approach. It used to be that when Hasidim would learn, let's say, Likutei Torah or Tanya, many of them just read the words and just it translated. They didn't really, analyze it. They didn't really spend time in depth. There was always individuals that did, but as a rule, this was considered holy. Just like the Sfardim read Zohar, Hasidim read and learned Hasidus, but in a simple way. The Rashab was the first one at that time to offer a different approach, to be very analytical. And he wrote certain continuums of discourses known as hemshech, for the word continuation, that went on for several years. So from the year 1911 to 1915, 16, he wrote hundreds of Maimorim on one theme, continuing it week after week, month after month, year after year. That's a phenomenal accomplishment. So the Rashab, that was one of his accomplishments. The other accomplishment was the yeshiva, the Lubavitch yeshiva, the Chabad yeshiva. Today there are hundreds of such yeshivas, but it all began in Russia, in a little tiny village or townlet called Lubavitchi, depending on where it's written and what period. And from there, he raised, through his teachers and his guidance, he raised the soldiers that he created, who had students and who gave their life to fight communism and Stalinism, and ultimately brought Chabad Hasidus to Eretz Yisrael, to America, to England, to Canada, to Australia. So if not for the yeshiva, the Chabad movement would have been like all other Hasidic movements, which were decimated between Stalin and the Holocaust and rebuilt after the Holocaust. But in Chabad, we find a very interesting thing, that those few that were left, just like Breslov was wiped out, Chabad was wiped out. But the difference is that because of the model that the Rashab put into the yeshiva, his son, the successor of Yosef Yitzchak, the previous Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe of Chabad, he created an underground movement of yeshivas and chadarim, which, by the way, many Breslov learned in, and Chernobyl, whoever was in that region and wanted their kids to be in a yeshiva and they weren't afraid that they'll be taken away and killed and all that, sent them to these chadarim. And I can tell you families after families of Chabad today that are only today Chabad with their children and grandchildren, great children, because of these chaters underground. And where did that come from? From the previous Rebbe. Where did he come from? His father. So the Rashab is credited with instilling in his students in 1897, 98, 99, 1900 to 1915, etc., 1920, this fire. Others didn't have yeshivas, you know that. The Litvische had yeshivas, Slabodka, Tells, and truth be told, they also created students who, in their approach, continued. Tells, for example, was very powerful. Mir is very powerful. So Mir, were rescued. They came to Shanghai, had a very big yeshiva, much bigger than the Chabad yeshiva in Shanghai, and many of the Rosh Yeshiva and the Gedolim, both in Eretz Yisrael and in America, were Mira Talmidim. They're all gone today, most of them are gone, but they were Mira Talmidim. Right? You remember Rabbi Malinowitz, who graced us the first time. Moshe, I don't know if Moshe, you were there. Hillel, I think, was there. I used to, that year that I was in Bet Shemesh, when we opened the Koilel, so I would try every Thursday to bring a guest speaker, or every 2 Thursdays, whatever I can get a rabbi, a scholar. We had some very interesting talks. So the first one who spoke was Rabbi Malinowitz Olav Sholem, the Rav of the Shul, right? And he had invited me to the previous summer when I came to scout the area. Reb Shmuel asked me to do that. Shmuel Stroll. So I did that. And he said to his congregation when he introduced me, he had 3 teachers. Reb Abba Berman was his teacher in Gemara. Reb Abba was a student in Shanghai and a great Goin. And then he said he had Reb Moshe Feinstein in Halacha and Reb Yoel Kahn in Ashkafa. But I'm just saying that in Gemara, who was the one who taught this big Goin, Rabbi Milinowitz, who was the chief editor of the Art Scrolls Shas, both in Hebrew and in English? Rabbi Milinowitz. And who's Rebbe? Who taught him? He said, Rabbi Abba Berman. Where did Abba Berman come from? From the Mir. So it must be said, the truth be told, that there was a strong element of the Litvische world who did continue, and they brought Torah, Talmud, and that approach to Eretz Yisrael and to America. But I'm talking about the Hasidim. The Hasidim, we see that there was decimation. There was so little left. But Lubavitch, although there was little left, they were very organized. And that's because between 1920 and 1940, they had an entire group. Now, Navardik, which is a very Litvish, Musar-oriented approach, had many little yeshivas too. But again, the focus was heavy Musar. And they had many little yeshivas. So Navardik, truth be told, also had this kind of underground campaign those 20 years from 1920 to 1940. But we're talking about Hasidim. So the Rashab, I'm pointing that because of what the Rashab put into his yeshiva at the time, that created the basis and fire that his students and students continued on during the times which were more difficult because of communism and everything else. And one more point, I'll finish with this, is that next Friday is the Rebbe's birthday. And of course, we celebrate a birthday even after someone has passed on, because a tzaddik, every Jew, lives eternally through the neshama, especially a tzaddik. Especially a tzaddik, that if you go any day of the week to the oil, night or day, you'll see all kinds of Jews, Yidden, just like by Rashab, and just like by the Ribnitzer Rebbe, by the Rebbe, it's more people, but the point being that we still celebrate this, our Rebbe's Yom Holedus, and the focus of the Rebbe, everyone knows, I don't have to tell you, was Avas Yisrael, together with the deepest ideas in Torah. I'm learning now, and I think I mentioned, I'm learning now with a few people, the Rebbe's Haggadah. It's fascinating. I never really learned it, well, and even now, but I'm going slowly, really slowly with one chavrusa. We spend maybe an hour on one paragraph. Why? Because the Rebbe wrote it in 1946. And he wrote it very cryptically and very briefly. See here, see here, see here, so he'll give you a line or two, and then you need to look at the references if you really want to understand it more elaborately. And in learning this, it's like, you see that this person, he knew the whole Torah, from the Kabbalah to the Medrash to the Gemara to Chassidus. He's like throwing references. So the Rebbe, his Avas Yisrael was predicated on Torah. Never did he deviate from Torah. Like I told you yesterday, that the Rebbe was very unhappy if people, when it came to the border, with the taxes, in Eretz Yisrael, in America, bringing in things, he wrote to Emanuel Shachad, Rabbi Shachad. Rabbi Shachad was a big Talmud Chacham and a God-fearing Jew, but when he was a certain point, he went to Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe wrote, make sure to declare your items. Don't play the games that many play. The Rebbe was very frum. Simply, if you just to say it in our language, very frum, very religious. Bottom line, no monkey business. So this Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose birthday is next Friday, Yud Aleph Nisan, he incorporated within himself a vast knowledge of all parts of Torah, together with their religiosity, which was awesome, and with the Avas Yisrael. This morning in Shul, someone's going out, a Vishnitzer, an older than me, He says to me, if someone collects money, and he's a Mechalel Shabbos, he desecrates Shabbos, he eats treif, he doesn't eat kosher, are you allowed to give him money? I said, sure. Not only are you allowed to, you need to. So he said, but he's going to use the money to buy a cheeseburger. He didn't say those words, treif. I said, how do you know? You're God, you know he's going to buy a cheeseburger? Isn't it possible that by you, with a beard, with your hat and your jacket and your payas, gave him money, he's going to say, ooh, I always had a negative opinion about these Haredim, about these ultra-Orthodox Jews, okay? And he gave me money. That means he considers me to be a fine person. Maybe I'll have one less cheeseburger. Is that possible? I asked him. He says, you're a Lubavitcher. You understand? It's not that I'm a Lubavitcher. That's the Torah. I didn't want to say this to him because he's older and I have respect. You're accusing another Jew of doing a transgression against God when all he's asking you is for some charity. You're not telling me that he's using it for drugs. You're not telling me he's using it to cheat and steal. You're telling me that, seemingly he doesn't keep Shabbos. Seemingly he doesn't keep kosher. And by you giving him the money, you are partnering with him in his violation and transgression against God. That's an assumption. So the Rebbe is the one that brought to the Yiddish world post-Holocaust, really, this thing, and today it's really prevalent, Baruch Hashem, and it's even within other Hasidic groups and other Litvische groups. There are Litvische groups now that are offering people the lulav and esrog on Sukkos and giving out matzahs. My father had an encounter in Mea Shearim, or Geula, in Jerusalem in 1955 or 56 I think, with Reb Amram Bloy. I think I told you this once. The Rebbe at that time just started with the idea of giving shmura matzah to other Jewish people who don't have the round hand-baked matzah called shmura matzah. My father was working in the matzah bakery to make a few shekels, okay? And he goes over to the organizer in the matzah bakery, and he didn't know really who he is, and they told him he's Reb Amram Bloy's son. Okay, and he says, can you give me a few matzahs so I can give to other Jews. So Amram Bloy's son says to my father was 16, 17, 18. He says to him, who are these matzahs for? My father says, it's for people who don't have shmura matzah. He says, you mean goyim? Gentiles? He says, no, they're not Gentiles, they're Jews. They're Yidden. No, they're not Yidden. They don't keep Shabbos, they're goyim. And I'm not giving you matzah to give to goyim. At that time, the father of his father, Rabbi Amram, who was one of the founders, of the Natura Karta, walks into the bakery. My father goes over to him and says, your son doesn't want to give me 2-3 matzahs so I can help distribute to other people. What did he ask for? A few matzahs. So Rabbi Amram says to my father, why doesn't he want to give you? He says, because I'm giving him to goyim. He says, who are you giving it to? Jews. He says, are they Orthodox? Are they from? Do they keep Shabbos? He says, no. He says, my son is right. So my father turns to Rabbi Amram and says, you're a Rashab. This young schnook says to Rabbi Amram, and the place, they wanted to kill my father. Because they were all the Torah Kartaniks, They wanted to eat him up alive. And my father says to Rabbi Amram, and I'll tell you why you're a Rashab. He says, I'm not calling you a Rashab. The Balatanya calls you a Rashab. In Tanya, on the first page of Tanya, chapter 1. It says at the end of the first page, chapter 1 of Tanya, it says that if you don't learn, quoting the Gemara, that if you don't learn every moment, you're a Rashab. And the Rebbe then quotes the Pasuk on the first line of the second page on page 10. Hikaris to Karis. You shall be cut off, die. You'll be punished, you'll die, because you don't learn every moment. My father turns to Reb Amram and he says, Reb Amram, do you learn Torah every minute? Reb Amram didn't answer. So they are Rishoyim, but you're not a Rasha. You're also a Rasha, because you don't learn every moment. The next day, the story was written up on the front page, I think, of Panim Chadoshas, whatever the newspaper was, of Geula and Meir Shorim for the Charedim. Lubavitcher Bacher calls Reb Amram a Rasha. Great story. Great story. And guess what? They did not give him the matzah. And the Rebbe abolished this, at least by most Jews. You don't look at another Jew that the other Jew is wicked and a Rasha and desecrating. You look at a Jew with a right eye, and you always find the good, and you give him the benefit of the doubt. That's Yud Aleph Nisan. That's why we're still celebrating the Rebbe's birthday, although he passed away 30 years ago. How do you like that? Because this reality continues. And it continues in many circles. Baruch Hashem. That's what we're celebrating. So someone says to you, how can you celebrate the Lubavitcher Rebbe's birthday if he's already passed away 30 years? The answer is, his message, it didn't pass away. His message is very alive, stronger and stronger, and Baruch Hashem, it's become part of the larger Jewish community with Kiruv organizations, etc., and Kol HaKavod. So everyone should have a kosher Freilich and Pesach. Cheres Amiti, true liberation. Hashem should liberate us personally from our golus, from our slave mentality. We should leave our slave mentality. We are Yidden. We don't owe anything to anybody, only to Hashem. And we should break out. That's what Pesach is about, freedom. You got to break out and take one thing. Everyone has a week and a half left to Pesach. Take one thing that you think that you want to work on and you want to free yourself from this coming Pesach and beyond, right? So everyone should think about, where am I stuck? Where am I a slave? In which area am I a slave? And in other words, where can I not break out? And that is what you should focus on, and take your time at the Seder, and truly invite people, even in Bet Shemesh, in your own buildings. I am sure there are people who are sitting by themselves, religious, not religious. If go over, knock at the door, invite them, show them you care, they'll come a little bit and they'll leave. That makes no difference. They'll come in. They'll hear a word. They'll get a matzah, a piece of matzah. They'll get a cup of wine. They'll be mesameach. So think about your neighbors and your friends and others, and make sure that everyone has a Seder. The Rebbe's main nekuda was that there's a fifth son. And where is he? He's not at the table. Why is he not at the table? Because he doesn't even know it's Pesach. He doesn't care about Pesach. So our idea is to bring in the fifth son. The four are here, even the Tom, the simpleton, and Shena Yedei Elishul, the one who doesn't know how to ask, but they're sitting there. They're sitting like this, or they're sitting like this, right? But they're sitting there. But there are those that are not sitting there. You got to bring that fifth son in. So everyone, we have a job. We have a job, a week and a half left to reach out. Today it's so easy, through email, through WhatsApp, through texting. There's so many ways to reach people all over the world. It's simple, takes 2 seconds. So have that in mind, and everyone should only see Yiddish Nachas from your families, children, grandchildren, Shidduchim Toivim, Parnosa Bar Chava, better health, excellent health. Anyone needs a refuah shlema, should really have a refuah shlema, take it from a yad. Shidduchim, everyone should bring their children to the chuppah. We should only have good things. And again, we'll see everyone, Mitzvah Hashem, the Monday after Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Not Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is I think Wednesday or Thursday, but the Monday after. So we'll start from that Monday. We'll continue chapter 4. Any final questions or thoughts or anything? Seid gesund, my friends. Love you all. Chag kosher v'sameach. Thank you. Pesach. Kosher and freilich and Pesach. Love you all. Seid gesund. See you all. If you have any questions, just send me a WhatsApp, regarding Pesach or this or that. I'm always available to you, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.